Hey guys, tonight we're diving into ancient Egypt during the time of Moses. A world so brutal that your worst Monday morning would feel like a luxury spa day in comparison. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe grab that extra blanket, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Spoiler alert, you wouldn't survive until breakfast. The shouting starts before dawn. Egyptian overseers are already cracking whips outside your mud brick hovel, and your body aches from yesterday's beating before you even open your eyes. Your bed is a woven straw mat that's become a 5-star resort for fleas, lice, and every other parasite that treats your blood like an endless buffet. The bites from last night's feeding frenzy have left your skin covered in red, itchy welts that you'll scratch raw before the morning ends. The single room you share with your family would dissolve into mud soup if it rained hard, but you're living in a desert where the sun will try to murder you instead. The walls are made of sun-dried mud bricks mixed with straw and animal dung, creating the perfect breeding ground for insects and disease. There are no windows in the modern sense, just small openings covered with reed mats that do little to keep out dust, flies, or the oppressive heat. The air you're breathing is a toxic cocktail of smoke from cooking fires, dust from constantly blowing sand, and the nauseating stench of human waste that gets tossed directly into the streets. Ancient Egyptians who worked in enclosed spaces regularly developed what we'd now call black lung disease from constant smoke inhalation. The poorly ventilated houses also cause desert lung disease from perpetual sand exposure. Your lungs are already filing complaints, and your workday hasn't even started. But there's no time to contemplate your respiratory health because Egyptian taskmasters are shouting orders in a language that always sounds angry. And you're about to spend the next 12 hours making bricks under conditions that would shut down any modern workplace faster than you can say OSHA violation. Your commute to work is a trudge to the Nile riverbank, where you'll collect clay and mud from water, so contaminated it makes a gas station bathroom look sterile. Studies of ancient Egyptian mummies reveal that 65% of people contracted schistosomiasis from this very water, a parasite that causes calcification of the bladder, fibrosis of the intestine, scarring of the liver, severe anemia, chronic fatigue, and possibly heart disease. The Egyptians were so aware of this danger, they literally advised men who worked near water to wear penile sheaths made of linen as protection. When an entire civilization creates specialized genital armor just for water contact, you know that water is actively trying to kill you. The brick-making process itself would break your soft modern body within hours. Archaeological evidence from the tomb of Rekhmere, the Egyptian vizier from the mid-15th century BCE, shows us exactly how this worked. The tomb paintings depict slaves of various ethnicities engaged in every stage of brick production, fetching water, kneading clay, moulding bricks, and leaving them to dry in the sun. Egyptian overseers stand nearby with sticks, not ceremonial sticks, but very real instruments of workplace discipline. You begin by mixing Nile mud with chopped straw, either by trampling the mixture with your bare feet or working it with hose. Modern experiments conducted at Tel Temir reveal that workers had to knead this mixture for 4 solid days to achieve proper consistency. 4 days of stomping around in parasite-infested mud under the blazing Egyptian sun. Your feet would crack and bleed before you finished the first day, creating open wounds that would quickly become infected in the contaminated mixture. The physical toll is immediate and brutal. Your soft office worker hands, accustomed to typing on keyboards and holding coffee cups, would be shredded to raw hamburger within the first hour of handling rough clay and wooden moulds. Your back, used to ergonomic chairs and proper lumbar support, would be screaming in agony from the constant bending and lifting. Your shoulders and arms, which might occasionally carry a laptop bag, would be on fire from hauling heavy loads of wet clay and finished bricks. Egyptian records, including Papyrus Anastasia III, confirm that brickmakers had daily quotas they were required to meet, The papyrus states, likewise, people are making bricks. They're making their quota of bricks daily. Miss your numbers, and you're about to be introduced to Egyptian performance management techniques. These weren't gentle conversations about improvement opportunities. They involved sticks, fists, and various creative applications of pain. You press the mud mixture into rectangular wooden moulds, trying to create uniform bricks while your bleeding hands leave red streaks on everything you touch. The moulds are rough and splintered from constant use, adding new cuts to your already damaged hands. You arrange the formed bricks in neat rows under the merciless sun, where they'll bake for about a week. The sun that's slowly killing you is the only technology available for this crucial drying process. But you're not meeting your quota. How could you? Your hands are too soft, your back isn't strong enough, and you have no idea what you're doing. Every few minutes, an overseer walks by and notices your pathetic production rate. The first few warnings come with shouts and threats. After that, they start using the sticks. Then Pharaoh decides to transform your impossible job into something truly hopeless. According to Exodus 5:7-8, he issues this command: "You shall no longer give the people straw to make bricks as before. Let them go and gather straw for themselves. But you shall require of them the same quantity of bricks as they have made previously. Do not diminish it." This isn't just removing a convenience, it's sabotaging the entire process. Modern archaeological experiments have proven that bricks made without straw are fragile and easily broken. The straw isn't decorative filler. It's a crucial binding agent that provides tensile strength and prevents cracking during the drying process. Without it, your bricks crumble in your hands like stale cookies, making it physically impossible to meet your quota no matter how hard you work. Pharaoh has just told you to maintain the same productivity while using defective materials. It's like your boss demanding you maintain the same work output while removing half your software, breaking your computer, and cutting your team in half. The setup is designed for failure, and failure brings punishment. This creates the perfect justification for escalated beatings. Egyptian interrogation records from tomb robbery investigations describe techniques where suspects were examined by beating with a stick, and their feet and hands were twisted. Papyrus BM 10,052 records, examination. The foreigner Ahautunufer, son of Nek, was presented. He said, "Far be it from me, far be it from me." He was examined with a stick and found innocent. The Egyptians believed you couldn't get truthful answers or proper work performance without severe physical torture first. Now you're running around, frantically trying to gather straw from whatever sources you can find, while somehow maintaining brick production with your bleeding, infected hands. The straw you manage to collect is often insufficient or poor quality, making your bricks even more fragile. Every crumbling brick is another strike against you in the eyes of the overseers, who are looking for any excuse to demonstrate their authority. Your back is locked in permanent spasm from the constant bending and lifting. You're severely dehydrated because clean water doesn't exist. Everything comes from the parasite-infested Nile. You haven't eaten anything substantial except gritty bread that's literally grinding your teeth down to infected stumps with every bite. The bread is made from flour contaminated with sand and grit from stone grinding wheels, which acts like edible sandpaper on your dental enamel. By 10 a.m, you're already completely broken. Your hands are raw meat wrapped around wooden tools. Your feet are cracked and bleeding from trampling in contaminated mud. Your back feels like someone is driving hot spikes into your spine with every movement. You're dizzy from dehydration and heat exhaustion. Infected insect bites cover your arms and face, and you still have 8 hours of work left, during which the heat will become truly unbearable. Even the Israelites, God's chosen people who had divine promises and generations of adaptation to these conditions, were groaning under slavery, according to Exodus 2:23. These were people born into this system, with bodies hardened by lifelong manual labour and immune systems that had developed some resistance to local diseases over generations of exposure. Their skin was tough from years of sun exposure. Their hands were calloused from constant work. Their backs were strong from carrying heavy loads since childhood, and even they were breaking under this system. You, on the other hand, have soft office worker hands that get paper cuts from manila folders. You complain when your coffee takes more than 3 minutes to brew. Your idea of manual labour is carrying grocery bags from the car. Your back goes out from sleeping wrong. You're about as prepared for ancient Egyptian slave labour as a goldfish would be for Navy SEAL training. But your day of impossible brick quotas and systematic torture is about to become completely insignificant. Because Moses is having a conversation with Pharaoh about letting the Israelites go, and when Pharaoh refuses, the God of Israel is about to demonstrate what happens when divine power meets royal stubbornness. What's coming next will make your brutal workday look like a relaxing spa retreat. When Pharaoh refuses Moses' request to let the Israelites worship in the wilderness, the God of Israel responds with 10 supernatural disasters that systematically destroy Egyptian civilization while humiliating every deity in their elaborate pantheon. These aren't random acts of divine wrath. They're precision-guided theological missiles designed to prove that Egyptian gods are completely powerless against the true God of creation. You wake up one morning and stumble toward the Nile for your daily dose of parasite-infested water, only to discover that the entire river has transformed into blood. Not red-tinted water that looks like blood. Actual blood with the thick consistency, metallic smell, and nauseating taste of the real thing. The stench hits you first, an overwhelmingly powerful combination of iron and decay that makes you gag violently before you even reach the riverbank. Millions of fish are floating belly up in the crimson water, their dead eyes staring accusingly at the sky, while their rotting bodies bob and weave in the bloody current. The smell of decomposing fish mixed with the metallic odour of blood creates an olfactory assault so powerful that you're dry heaving within seconds of breathing it in. This plague directly attacks Hapi, the god of the Nile and the foundation of Egyptian civilization, along with Khnum, the ram-headed god who was believed to be the creator of water and life itself. You're watching your most important deity, the god who controls your life source, get publicly humiliated by the god of some Hebrew slaves. The psychological impact is devastating. The Ipuwer Papyrus, an Egyptian document dating to around 1400 BCE, describes this exact scenario with chilling accuracy. The river is blood, men shrink from tasting, human beings, and thirst after water. That is our water. That is our happiness. What shall we do in respect thereof? All is ruin. You're frantically digging along the riverbank, hoping to find clean groundwater, but everything is contaminated with the bloody seepage. No bread can be made because bread requires water. No beer can be brewed. And beer was your primary source of nutrition and your safest drinking option. No bathing, no cooking, no cleaning. You're dying of thirst while surrounded by liquid you absolutely cannot consume, watching your water god prove completely impotent to help his people. Just as you're beginning to adapt to the blood-water crisis, millions of frogs begin emerging from the toxic river and invading every conceivable space in your world. These aren't a few cute pond frogs hopping around. These are desperate amphibians fleeing their poisoned habitat in massive numbers, and they're taking over your life with overwhelming persistence. Exodus 8:3-4 describes their invasion with uncomfortable specificity. The river shall bring forth frogs abundantly, which shall go up and come into your house, into your bedroom, on your bed, into the houses of your servants, on your people, into your ovens, and into your kneading bowls. You wake up with frogs sharing your straw sleeping mat, their cold, slimy bodies pressed against your skin all night. You open your grain storage containers, completely full of frogs. You try to prepare what little food you have left. Frogs in every bowl, every pot, every cooking surface. They're in your clothes, your blankets, your hair. Every step you take involves crushing frogs underfoot with a disgusting squelching sound. The noise becomes a form of psychological torture. Millions of stressed, displaced amphibians create a constant cacophony of croaking that makes sleep absolutely impossible. It's like living inside a broken nature documentary that's stuck on maximum volume, except the soundtrack never stops and it's happening in your bedroom. This plague makes a mockery of Heket, the frog-headed goddess of childbirth and fertility. You're being invaded by her sacred animals, while she offers absolutely no protection or relief. Your goddess of fertility is presiding over the most fertility-related invasion in history, and she's completely powerless to stop it. Then the frogs start dying en masse. The stench of millions of rotting amphibians mixed with the already overwhelming smell of rotting fish and blood creates an olfactory nightmare that makes constant vomiting unavoidable. You're walking through ankle-deep layers of decomposing frog corpses that squelch and pop under your feet like the world's most disgusting bubble wrap, releasing bursts of putrid gas with every step. The massive quantities of decomposing flesh, fish and frogs rotting under the desert sun, create perfect breeding conditions for every biting insect in Egypt. Modern epidemiological research suggests these were likely culicoids, microscopic flying demons whose larvae feed on decomposing organic matter and whose bites carry diseases capable of killing both livestock and humans. Your entire body becomes a living canvas of infected bite marks within hours. The constant itching drives you to scratch until you bleed, which creates open wounds that attract even more insects in a vicious cycle of escalating misery. You can't stop clawing at your skin, but the relief only lasts seconds before the itching resumes with increased intensity. Every breath you take includes inhaling gnats and other tiny insects. Every bite of food crunches with insects you can't possibly remove. Sleep becomes completely impossible because they swarm around your head in dense clouds, getting into your ears, nose, eyes and mouth no matter what you do to protect yourself. The psychological torture of feeling things constantly crawling on your skin is enough to drive people insane. You're living in a constant state of panic, never able to relax because your nervous system is under perpetual assault. Your skin feels like it's crawling even when nothing is touching you, creating phantom sensations that make you claw at yourself in desperate attempts to find relief that never comes. The insect situation escalates from annoying to apocalyptic as massive swarms of disease-carrying flies transform your environment into an unlivable nightmare. These aren't just houseflies buzzing around. These are biting flies that attack in coordinated aerial assaults, covering every surface like a living, buzzing blanket of filth. Food spoilage becomes instantaneous. The moment you uncover any food item, flies swarm it and begin laying eggs, transforming your meals into maggot nurseries within minutes. You can't eat anything without consuming fly eggs and larvae, which adds protein to your diet in the most disgusting way possible. You can't open your mouth to speak or breathe without inhaling flies. You can't see clearly because they're constantly swarming around your face in dense clouds. The buzzing is so constant and overwhelming that it becomes a form of auditory torture, like being trapped inside an industrial blender filled with angry insects that never stops running. Every surface you touch is covered with flies. They're in your hair, crawling on your skin, getting under your clothes. When you try to sleep, they swarm your face and body so intensely that rest becomes impossible. You're living inside a horror movie where the special effects never stop and there's no escape from the theatre. The disease-carrying insects now spread fatal illnesses that kill all Egyptian livestock within days. Your oxen, horses, camels, cattle, sheep and goats, the entire foundation of Egyptian agriculture and transportation, drop dead in their tracks, creating an economic collapse that makes modern recessions look like minor inconveniences. This plague delivers a devastating blow to Hathor, the cow-headed goddess who was one of the most important deities in the Egyptian pantheon, and Apis, the sacred bull worshipped as a god incarnate. You're watching your most revered animal deities die while their divine representatives prove completely powerless to save them. The smell of massive animal carcasses rotting under the desert sun creates a stench so overpowering that it triggers immediate and violent vomiting. These aren't small animals. We're talking about horses, cattle, and camels decomposing in the heat, creating toxic gas clouds that can be smelled from miles away. The putrid air makes breathing itself an act of endurance. Your entire food supply system has just collapsed. No milk, no meat, no leather for clothing and tools, no animals for transportation or farm work. The oxen that pulled ploughs are rotting in the fields. The horses that carried soldiers and goods are bloating in the sun. The cattle that provided protein and dairy are attracting clouds of maggots. Famine isn't approaching. It has arrived with devastating completeness. The contaminated flies and exposure to rotting meat now gives everyone in Egypt painful, pus-filled boils that erupt across their entire bodies. Medical analysis suggests these were likely caused by glanders, a highly contagious bacterial disease that creates large, weeping sores that refuse to heal and often prove fatal if untreated. Your skin becomes a landscape of infected craters that make every single movement absolute agony. Sitting is torture. Lying down is torture. Walking is torture. Even breathing deeply causes the boils on your chest to stretch and send shooting pains through your body. You look like something from a medical textbook on medieval plague victims, covered in suppurating wounds that smell like death and decay. The psychological impact is almost worse than the physical pain. You can see your reflection in still water and witness your transformation into a walking horror show. Your appearance is so grotesque that people avoid looking directly at you, and you can't blame them because you can barely stand to exist in your own diseased body. Even the Egyptian magicians, the religious professionals who were supposed to be able to replicate miraculous signs, cannot duplicate this plague because they're too busy dealing with their own boils. Exodus 9:11 notes, "The magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils, for the boils were on the magicians and on all the Egyptians." Your religious leaders are hobbling around covered in infected sores, providing visible proof that their gods are completely powerless against this foreign deity. Just when you think your suffering can't intensify, the sky itself begins attacking you with supernatural weather that defies all natural laws. Hailstones mixed with fire, possibly lightning-charged ice or burning meteorites, rain down from heaven, destroying every crop and tree that somehow survived the previous disasters. You're caught outside during this otherworldly storm, being pelted by ice while fires rage all around you. The hailstones are large enough to kill animals and humans, while the fire spreads rapidly through whatever vegetation remains. The sound is deafening. Imagine the noise of a major hailstorm combined with the roar of wildfire and the crack of constant thunder. This plague directly attacks Seth, the god of chaos and storms, proving that even the deities who supposedly controlled weather and natural disasters are completely impotent against the God of Israel. The Tempest Stele of Ahmose I describes similar apocalyptic rainstorms that devastated ancient Egypt, possibly connected to the volcanic eruption on the island of Thera. Whatever food security remained after the livestock died is now completely and permanently obliterated. Every grain crop, every fruit tree, every vegetable garden, every source of plant-based nutrition has been destroyed by supernatural weather. You're not just facing hunger anymore, you're looking at absolute starvation with zero possibility of agricultural recovery until the next growing season, assuming there even is one. Any plant that somehow managed to survive the fire and hail is now devoured by a locust swarm so massive it blocks out the sun. These aren't the relatively harmless grasshoppers you might see in a garden. These are voracious eating machines capable of stripping all vegetation from vast areas in a matter of hours. The sound of millions of locusts chewing through the last traces of plant life creates a constant, deafening, rustling noise, like industrial machinery running at full capacity. You watch helplessly as every remaining green thing disappears into the bellies of insects, erasing the final traces of agricultural civilization from the landscape. This plague makes a mockery of any remaining agricultural deities, and proves that the natural order itself is under the control of the Hebrew god. You're witnessing the complete erasure of the plant kingdom, while your gods demonstrate their absolute inability to protect even the most basic foundations of survival. You're now facing total famine with no hope whatsoever of recovery. There is literally nothing left to eat in all of Egypt except what might be stored away, and those supplies won't last long. The agricultural foundation of civilization has been completely removed from existence, and you're staring at mass starvation on a scale that makes historical famines look like minor food shortages. For 3 full days, supernatural darkness so complete that no fire can illuminate it blankets the entire land of Egypt. This isn't ordinary nighttime darkness that you could navigate with torches or oil lamps. This is impenetrable, absolute darkness that swallows light itself and makes movement impossible. This plague delivers the ultimate humiliation to Ra, the sun god who was arguably the most powerful and important deity in the entire Egyptian pantheon. The god who supposedly controlled the sun and brought light to the world is completely powerless to dispel this supernatural darkness that makes his very existence seem like a cruel joke. You're trapped in complete sensory deprivation for 72 straight hours. You can't work, can't prepare food, can't navigate your own home, can't do anything except sit in absolute blackness and contemplate the complete failure of everything you've believed about the world. The psychological terror of being trapped in utter helplessness while surrounded by the rotting remains of the previous plagues creates a level of mental anguish that breaks even the strongest minds. You're stumbling around blind, bumping into decomposing animal carcasses, tripping over debris from the hailstorm, stepping on rotting frogs, completely disoriented and terrified. Every sound seems amplified and threatening in the darkness. You can hear other people crying, praying and calling out for help, but you can't see them or effectively help them because you can't even see your own hands. When you complain about your internet taking 30 seconds to load a video, remember that these people endured 3 days of supernatural darkness, so complete they couldn't navigate their own homes. Your Wi-Fi connection is more reliable than their sun god proved to be. The final plague strikes at the heart of Egyptian society by killing every firstborn son and firstborn animal throughout the land in a single night. Whether this was caused by mycotoxins from grains stored in contaminated conditions or by direct supernatural intervention, the result is the systematic destruction of Egyptian leadership, inheritance systems, and future hopes. Exodus 12:29-30 describes the scope of this devastation. At midnight the Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on the throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and the firstborn of all the livestock. Pharaoh and all his officials and all the Egyptians got up during the night, and there was loud wailing in Egypt, for there was not a house without someone dead. The sound of simultaneous grief from every household in Egypt creates an audio landscape of despair unlike anything in human experience. Every family mourning their eldest son at the same time produces a collective wailing that seems to rise from the earth itself, a sound so filled with anguish that it makes you want to die just to escape having to hear it. This isn't just death, this is the systematic destruction of Egypt's entire future. In ancient societies, the firstborn son inherited property, carried on the family name, and provided leadership for the next generation. By killing every firstborn male, this plague eliminates the leadership class, destroys inheritance systems, and removes the people who would have been responsible for rebuilding Egyptian civilization. You're now living in the ruins of a completely destroyed society. There's no economy because all the livestock is dead. There's no food because all the crops were destroyed. There's no leadership because all the heirs are dead. There's no hope because every god has been systematically proven powerless. The survivors are traumatized, starving, diseased, and psychologically shattered people living among the rotting remains of their former civilization. Every deity in the Egyptian pantheon has been publicly humiliated by a god most Egyptians had never heard of before this nightmare began. Your entire religious worldview hasn't just been challenged, it's been systematically demolished by overwhelming evidence of its complete inadequacy. So here's your final reality check, and it's more devastating than anything Hollywood could imagine. Even your absolute worst modern day, dealing with food poisoning, sitting in traffic during a thunderstorm, spending hours on hold with customer service while your internet is down, remains infinitely better than the best day in plague-devastated Egypt. Let's start with the basics that you take for granted every single morning. You have clean, drinkable water flowing from multiple taps in your house whenever you want it. You don't have to walk to a parasite-infested river and dig holes hoping to find something that won't give you liver-eating worms. You turn a handle and safe water appears instantly. This alone makes you wealthier than Egyptian royalty. You have climate control, heating and air conditioning that maintain comfortable temperatures regardless of weather outside. You don't have to work during the cooler morning hours because the afternoon heat will literally kill you. You don't sleep on flea-infested straw mats in mud brick hovels that would dissolve in heavy rain. You sleep in clean beds, in temperature-controlled rooms with no insects trying to drink your blood all night. You have modern medicine that would seem like supernatural magic to ancient Egyptians. Antibiotics that can cure diseases that killed millions of people throughout history. Pain medications that eliminate suffering ancient people had to endure with no relief. Vaccines that prevent diseases that decimated entire populations. Surgery performed with sterilized instruments and clean environments by trained professionals rather than honey and prayer folk remedies. You have food safety regulations that ensure your meals won't kill you. Government agencies inspect your food supply to prevent contamination. Refrigeration keeps your food fresh. Packaging prevents insect infestation. You don't have to worry about your bread being contaminated with ergot fungus that causes hallucinations, gangrene and death. You don't have to drink chunky beer through straws to filter out sediment. Most importantly, you have labour laws that prevent employers from beating you with sticks for missing productivity targets. You have weekends, paid vacation, sick leave, workers' compensation, and the radical concept that your boss can't legally own you as property. You can quit your job if you don't like it. You can file complaints if you're mistreated. These concepts would have been incomprehensible to ancient Egyptian slaves, but let's talk about what you don't have to worry about, because this might be even more important than what you do have. You don't wake up wondering if today the rivers will turn to blood, making all water undrinkable. You don't worry about frogs invading your bedroom and filling your food containers. You don't live in fear of supernatural darkness that lasts for 3 days and makes navigation impossible. You don't have to concern yourself with diseases that were routine killers in ancient Egypt. Schistosomiasis, which affected 65% of the population and causes organ damage, chronic pain, and slow death. Malaria, which brings recurring fevers and can kill without treatment. Tuberculosis, which eats your lungs from the inside. These diseases shaped every aspect of daily life in ancient Egypt, and you probably don't even think about them because modern medicine has made them largely irrelevant to your existence. Consider the Israelites, the people who had generational adaptation to these conditions, divine protection, and direct communication with God through Moses. Even they were groaning under slavery, according to Exodus 2:23, and desperately wanted to escape. These were people born into the system, with bodies hardened by lifelong manual labour and immune systems that had developed some resistance to local diseases over many generations of exposure. Their hands were calloused from years of handling rough tools and materials. Their skin was leathered by constant sun exposure. Their backs were strengthened by carrying heavy loads since childhood. Their feet were toughened by walking on hot sand and rough surfaces. They had adapted over generations to survive on contaminated water, gritty bread, and minimal medical care. They knew how to work in extreme heat, how to avoid the worst parasites, and how to treat injuries with whatever materials were available. And even these adapted, resilient people were breaking under the Egyptian system. They were crying out to God for deliverance from conditions they could barely endure, despite being born into them. You, on the other hand, have office worker hands that develop calluses from holding a pen too long. You get upset when your coffee isn't the right temperature. Your idea of manual labour is carrying grocery bags from your car to your kitchen. Your back goes out from sleeping in the wrong position. You need GPS to navigate your own city, and complain when the route takes 5 minutes longer than expected. Your immune system has never encountered the diseases that were routine parts of life in ancient Egypt. Your digestive system gets upset from slightly expired milk or food that's been left out too long. Your pain tolerance is calibrated for minor inconveniences, not infected wounds, broken bones, and systematic beatings. You're psychologically unprepared for casual violence, routine death, and the complete absence of human rights or dignity. Their bread was so contaminated with grit from stone-grinding wheels that it literally wore their teeth down to infected stumps over time. Mummy studies show severe dental wear and multiple abscesses from eating what was considered normal food. Water from the Nile teemed with parasites that ate organs from the inside out. Fresh food spoiled within hours in the heat, because refrigeration was thousands of years from being invented. The average life expectancy was 19 to 25 years at birth, largely due to infant mortality rates that killed 1/3 of children before their 5th birthday. If you survived childhood, you might live to see 30 to 35 years old, but you'd spend those decades in constant pain from injuries, infections, parasites, and malnutrition. What we consider normal aging didn't happen because people died long before reaching what we'd call middle age. Even without the supernatural plagues, you would collect more life-threatening diseases before lunchtime on your first day than most modern people encounter in their entire lifetimes. Your pampered immune system would wave the white flag of surrender faster than a medieval army facing machine guns. When you lie down in your clean bed tonight, in your climate-controlled room, with clean water available at the turn of a handle and safe food in your refrigerator, take a moment to appreciate that compared to ancient Egypt during the time of Moses. You're living better than the pharaohs themselves ever dreamed possible. Even the Egyptian gods, who were supposed to control rivers, weather, disease, and death, proved completely powerless when confronted with the God of Israel. They couldn't protect their own people, couldn't maintain their own domains, and couldn't prevent their civilization from being systematically destroyed. Honestly, you wouldn't last a day in ancient Egypt. You probably wouldn't survive your first work break, but at least you have work breaks, and coffee to drink during them, and the reasonable expectation that rivers will stay their proper colour, and frogs will stay in the water where they belong. Sweet dreams, and remember, even your worst Monday morning is still paradise compared to any day in ancient Egypt, plague-free or otherwise. Hey guys, tonight we're stepping through the legendary Ishtar Gate into ancient Babylon, the largest city on Earth, ruled by one of history's most ruthless kings. We're talking about Nebuchadnezzar II, the man who destroyed Jerusalem, exiled entire nations, and built a golden statue 90 feet tall just to watch people worship it or burn alive. Picture yourself stepping through the Ishtar Gate, and immediately you know you're in trouble. These towering blue-glazed bricks shimmer like a giant Instagram filter, except everything behind them is designed to kill you. Lions, dragons, and bulls are carved into the walls with such detail, they look ready to jump out and maul you, which, considering Babylon's justice system, they probably will at some point. The street beyond is basically ancient Times Square if Times Square was run by a homicidal dictator with a god complex. Traders are shouting in languages that sound like they're arguing with their Wi-Fi connection. Goats are bleating like they're stuck in eternal customer service hold music, and cartwheels are squeaking louder than your office printer when it's out of toner. The smell hits you like opening a garbage disposal that's been broken for 3 months. You've got roasted meat mixing with incense, which sounds nice until you add the permanent stench of human waste baking in 110-degree heat. It's like someone took a food truck festival and combined it with a sewage treatment plant. Babylon is essentially the ancient world's version of New York City. Loud, crowded, smells questionable, but everyone who lives there thinks it's the centre of the universe. The main difference is that in Babylon, if you complain about the service, they feed you to lions. This city stretched for miles, protected by walls so massive they make medieval fortifications look like Lego constructions. The inner wall was 87 feet high, basically a 9-story building lying on its side, and thick enough that 4 chariots could race on top. It's like they took every anxious thought you've ever had about home security and built it into an actual fortress. The outer wall added another 20 feet, because apparently 87 feet wasn't quite paranoid enough. Between these walls was enough space for gardens, workshops and storage areas to sustain over 200,000 people during sieges. Think of it as the world's first gated community, except the HOA fees were paid in blood, and the penalty for violating community standards was being torn apart by wild animals. The Euphrates River flows right through the middle of the city, serving as water supply, transportation route, and toilet all at the same time. It's like having Amazon delivery, Uber and sewage treatment rolled into one convenient service. Except using it for any of those purposes could give you diseases that make food poisoning look like a light headache. Rising before you is the ziggurat of Etemenanke, the Tower of Babel from your Sunday school nightmares. This thing climbs 300 feet into the sky with 7 levels painted different colours, like the world's deadliest rainbow cake. Each level was dedicated to different gods, because apparently one god wasn't enough to handle Babylonian anxiety levels. Standing at the base makes you feel like you're looking up at a skyscraper, except this skyscraper was built by people who thought workplace safety regulations were suggestions from weak gods. The construction required millions of bricks, thousands of workers, and decades of labour, all funded by the ancient equivalent of a GoFundMe campaign, where contributing wasn't optional, and failures to donate could result in creative execution methods. Workers died regularly from falls, heat exhaustion, and the general occupational hazard of existing in Babylon. But they were immediately replaced like broken printers in a corporate office. As a worker in Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon, your morning alarm clock would be supervisors banging on doors and shouting like they're trying to wake the dead, which, considering the mortality rate, they probably were. You'd stumble out to join thousands of other workers trudging toward construction sites like zombies heading to Black Friday sales, except instead of discounted electronics, you're competing for the privilege of not being beaten with sticks. Your job involves hauling 50-pound bricks up wooden scaffolding that would make OSHA inspectors weep blood. It's like CrossFit, except the personal trainers carry whips, and missing your quota means becoming a human barbecue. The scaffolding consists of wooden planks held together with hope and rope, creating structures about as stable as your internet connection during a Zoom call. The workday runs from sunrise to sunset because Babylonians hadn't invented the weekend yet. They also hadn't invented workers' rights, lunch breaks, or the radical concept that maybe employees shouldn't die from their jobs. Your productivity is measured in bricks per day, and falling short means meeting with HR, except HR stands for human roasting, and the exit interview involves literal fire. Your modern hands would be destroyed faster than a phone screen without a case. These soft, moisturised fingers that struggle with pickle jars would be raw hamburger within hours of handling rough clay and splintered tools. You'd develop blisters, then the blisters would develop blisters, then the whole situation would get infected because ancient Babylon's medical plan was rub some dirt in it and pray to Marduk. The heat would be like working inside a pizza oven that someone forgot to turn off. Temperatures regularly hit 110 degrees Fahrenheit, which is hot enough to cook an egg on the sidewalk if Babylon had sidewalks, which they didn't, because they were too busy building monuments to royal egos. You'd be sweating more than a politician during a fact check, except your sweat would be immediately absorbed by the desert air, leaving you dehydrated faster than your motivation during Monday morning meetings. Meanwhile, the taxation system would make your worst tax season look like a tropical vacation. The king literally owns everything. Your grain, your goats, your labour, and probably your firstborn if he needs extra workers for his next vanity project. It's like having a landlord who also owns your job, your car, and your Netflix password. Except instead of late fees, you get conscripted into the army or thrown to wild animals. Agricultural taxes started at 20 to 30%, but could jump to 50% faster than gas prices during crisis. The rate changes were announced about as far in advance as your boss tells you about mandatory overtime, which is to say, not at all. You'd wake up one morning to discover that this year's tax rate just doubled, because the king decided he needed another golden statue or a bigger swimming pool shaped like his favourite deity. But the real fun starts when Nebuchadnezzar's armies come home from their world tour of destruction and cultural genocide. In 586 BCE, he completely destroyed Jerusalem like he was cancelling a TV show after one season, except instead of disappointed fans, you get traumatised refugees who've lost everything they ever cared about. Imagine waking up one day as Daniel, living your best life in Jerusalem, and going to sleep as Belteshazzar, a prisoner in Babylon with a new name, new job, and new gods you're required to worship or face creative execution methods. It's like having your social media accounts hacked, your identity stolen, and your entire family relocated to a foreign country where you don't speak the language, and the local customs involve way more human sacrifice than you're comfortable with. This wasn't just conquest. It was systematic rebranding of entire civilizations. Your Hebrew name gets replaced with a Babylonian one faster than companies rebrand after PR disasters. Your language becomes forbidden in official settings like speaking your native tongue at an English-only workplace. Except the penalty isn't awkward HR meetings. It's having your tongue literally removed. Your religious practices get banned harder than controversial social media accounts. Your dietary laws are ignored like terms of service agreements, and your cultural traditions get cancelled faster than problematic celebrities. You're forced to worship foreign gods like you're subscribing to streaming services you never wanted, except cancelling your subscription results in being fed to lions instead of just losing access to premium content. The psychological trauma would be like having your entire digital identity deleted while you watch, except instead of losing your photos and playlists, you're losing everything that made you who you are as a human being. You'd be surrounded by monuments built by people who destroyed your civilization, forced to Instagram your slavery for the entertainment of your oppressors, required to give 5-star reviews to the king who murdered your family. And we haven't even gotten to the part where Nebuchadnezzar builds a golden statue and makes worshipping it mandatory, like the world's deadliest corporate team-building exercise. But more on that nightmare in a moment. So Nebuchadnezzar decides to build a golden statue 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide, which is basically like your CEOs commissioning a giant statue of themselves for the office lobby, except attendance at the unveiling ceremony is mandatory, and non-participation results in immediate termination of your life, not your employment. This statue gets erected on the plain of Dura, and everyone, government officials, military commanders, administrators, basically anyone with a LinkedIn profile, gets summoned for the dedication ceremony. It's like a company-wide meeting where attendance isn't just mandatory, it's survivalry mandatory, which isn't a word but should be. The setup is pure nightmare fuel disguised as a cultural event. The king assembles a full orchestra with horns, flutes, harps and other instruments, creating the world's deadliest flash mob. When the music starts, everyone must immediately faceplant into the dirt worshipping this golden statue. It's like Simon Says, except Simon is a psychopathic dictator, and losing means becoming a human s'more. Refuse to participate, show any hesitation, or fail to prostrate yourself with sufficient enthusiasm, and you get thrown into a furnace heated 7 times hotter than normal. It's the ultimate peer pressure situation. Everyone's watching everyone else, knowing that anyone who doesn't worship fast enough or convincingly enough will be immediately identified and incinerated like a bad performance review taken to its logical extreme. The psychological pressure would be absolutely unbearable for anyone with modern sensibilities about personal choice and religious freedom. You've got seconds to decide. Abandon everything you believe about God and worship a golden idol, or stick to your principles and become a crispy critter in front of thousands of witnesses. It's like being asked to rate your boss 5 stars on Glassdoor while they're standing behind you with a flamethrower. The music plays, and you're faced with the ultimate workplace dilemma. Compromise your integrity, or face immediate consequences that make being fired look like winning the lottery. Most people would fold faster than cheap lawn chairs, which is exactly what Nebuchadnezzar was counting on. 3 Hebrew guys, Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego, basically said, "Thanks, but no thanks," to the mandatory worship service. Their response to Nebuchadnezzar is like the most badass resignation letter ever written. Our God can deliver us from the furnace, but even if he doesn't, we're not worshipping your gold statue. Even if he doesn't, that's the ancient equivalent of saying, I'm prepared for this to go very badly, but I'm doing it anyway. They were so certain the furnace meant horrible death that they essentially included a contingency plan for divine abandonment. It's like going into a job interview knowing you're completely unqualified, but deciding to be honest anyway. Nebuchadnezzar's reaction reveals the true depth of his management philosophy. When employees don't follow company policy, turn up the heat literally. He orders the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual, which is like responding to a negative Yelp review by burning down the entire restaurant. The fire was so hot it killed the execution squad before they could retreat to safety, proving that this king's conflict resolution skills were somewhat lacking. But here's where it gets weird. The 3 guys walk around inside the furnace completely unharmed, joined by a mysterious 4th person who looks divine. Nebuchadnezzar, suddenly faced with supernatural middle management, immediately reverses his policy, promotes the very employees he just tried to barbecue, and issues company-wide memos threatening death to anyone who speaks against their god. Imagine watching this as a regular Babylonian office worker. Your CEO just demonstrated he's willing to burn people alive for not attending mandatory meetings. Then when his execution method fails spectacularly, he acts like promoting the intended victims was his plan all along. This is not confidence-inspiring leadership behaviour. Nebuchadnezzar's dream management style makes your worst micromanaging boss look reasonable. In Daniel 2, he has a disturbing dream and demands that his advisors tell him both what he dreamed and what it means, without him telling them the dream. It's like your boss asking you to fix a problem they won't describe, and getting angry when you can't read their mind. When his advisors reasonably point out that telepathy isn't in their job description, Nebuchadnezzar decides to execute all the smart people in Babylon. His management philosophy is basically, if you can't perform miracles on demand, you're fired. Except fired means literally set on fire. The dream in Daniel 4 is even more ominous. He dreams about a massive tree that gets chopped down, and Daniel explains that the tree represents the king himself, who will be driven from his throne to live like an animal for 7 years, until he admits that divine authority supersedes royal power. It's like dreaming your company gets shut down, and your advisor telling you it means you're about to have a complete mental breakdown and spend the next 7 years living in a van down by the river. Exactly 1 year later, while Nebuchadnezzar is walking around his palace taking credit for Babylon's success, like a CEO claiming responsibility for record profits during a pandemic, divine judgment strikes. He immediately loses his mind and spends 7 years living outdoors, eating grass like cattle, with hair like eagle feathers and fingernails like bird claws. Whether you interpret this as supernatural intervention or the world's most spectacular executive burnout, the result was identical. The most powerful ruler on earth became a wild man living in the wilderness, completely unable to manage his empire or remember his Zoom meeting passwords. For someone whose entire identity was built on control and dominance, this transformation was like having your social media accounts hacked, your email compromised, your bank accounts frozen, and your identity stolen all at the same time. Except instead of lasting a few weeks, it continued for 7 years and involved eating grass. Babylon's legal system makes your worst workplace experiences look like paid vacation. Standard punishments for displeasing management included being thrown to lions, burned alive, impaled on stakes, flayed alive, or fed to various wild animals in public entertainment events that were like Roman gladiator games crossed with modern reality TV. Except all the contestants died horribly. The fiery furnace wasn't a one-time construction project. It was standard corporate infrastructure, like having a conference room except instead of boring meetings, it was used for executing employees who violated company policy. Archaeological evidence suggests that furnaces for burning people alive were regular features of Babylonian government buildings, which is like modern offices having dedicated spaces for firing people, except more literal. The lion's den wasn't an improvised punishment either. Babylonian rulers maintained extensive collections of dangerous animals specifically for executing employees in ways that would terrorize witnesses and discourage workplace complaints. It's like having a company pet, except the pet is a pack of starving lions, and they're not there for morale boosting. Your modern concepts of workplace rights, legal representation, and appeals processes would be completely useless in this environment. One wrong word during a performance review, one moment of hesitation during mandatory corporate worship, one complaint about working conditions, and you'd be facing termination methods that make getting fired via email look gentle and humane. The legal system had no appeals process, no HR department, unless you count Hell's resources, and no protection against punishment based on royal mood swings. Your fate depended entirely on the king's personal feelings about you, which changed more frequently than social media algorithms and with significantly more deadly consequences. Babylon's religious system was like having every possible streaming service, premium membership and subscription box automatically charged to your account, except instead of monthly fees, you paid with livestock, grain and mandatory attendance at ceremonies that could consume your entire weekend. Marduk, the chief god, was like Netflix, supposedly essential and constantly demanding content. He required regular offerings of food, incense and precious metals, plus you had to attend his temple services, which were like church except longer, more expensive, and with significantly more animal sacrifice. Ishtar, the goddess of love and war, was like having Disney Plus and ESPN simultaneously. She demanded temple prostitutes, elaborate festivals lasting for weeks, and military victories dedicated in her honour. Her worship involved rituals that would make modern people extremely uncomfortable and require extensive therapy afterward. Nebu, the god of writing and wisdom, was like LinkedIn Premium for scribes. If you wanted to advance in any intellectual career, you had to dedicate your work to his glory and pay regular subscription fees in the form of writing materials and scholarly services. Each god had specific requirements, dietary restrictions and seasonal celebrations that could conflict with other gods' demands, creating impossible situations where satisfying one deity meant offending another. It's like having apps that require conflicting permissions, except instead of your phone glitching, angry gods might destroy your entire city. The priests managing this system wielded enormous power and controlled vast resources like tech companies controlling data. As a regular citizen, you'd interact with religious officials constantly, paying temple taxes like in-app purchases, participating in festivals like mandatory software updates, and seeking divine approval for major decisions like requesting permissions from various apps that all want access to your personal information. Failure to properly maintain your religious subscriptions could result in divine punishment, affecting not just you, but your entire neighbourhood, making religious non-compliance like being the person who doesn't update their antivirus software and crashes the entire network. The constant religious obligations would exhaust your time, energy and resources like having notifications constantly pinging from 20 different apps, except you can't turn them off, and ignoring them might result in being struck by lightning or eaten by sacred animals. The legendary hanging gardens were like the ultimate Instagram backdrop, except the beauty was built entirely on human suffering, and you'd never be allowed to take selfies there. These terraced gardens, rising like a green mountain, required constant maintenance by armies of workers who were valued less than the plants they watered. Working on the hanging gardens meant spending your days hauling water up multiple levels in blazing heat, tending exotic plants that received better healthcare than you did, and maintaining irrigation systems that had to work perfectly, or the entire project would collapse like a website crash during Black Friday. The gardens required soil to be carried level by level, creating artificial hills in the desert like building a mountain out of DoorDash orders, except instead of food delivery, you're delivering dirt while slowly dying from heat exhaustion and dehydration. You'd spend your entire life creating paradise for people who considered you less valuable than the flowers you were nurturing. Every beautiful blossom represented hours of backbreaking labour that benefited everyone except yourself, like working for a company where you build the product but can never afford to buy it. The psychological impact would be crushing, creating heaven on earth for your oppressors while living in conditions that barely qualified as human existence. It's like being forced to manage the social media accounts of people who destroyed your life, posting happy content about their success while your own world burns in the background. Let's be honest about your physical preparedness for ancient Babylonian life. You'd be about as successful as a chocolate teapot in a volcano. Your soft, moisturized hands that struggle with stubborn pickle jars would be destroyed within hours of handling rough clay and splintered tools. You'd develop blisters on your blisters, then those would get infected because Babylon's medical plan was rub some dirt in it and sacrifice a goat. Modern construction workers who've been doing physical labour their entire lives could maybe manage 100 bricks per day under optimal conditions. You, with your ergonomic keyboard experience and extensive knowledge of proper lifting techniques from that one workplace safety video you half-watched, might manage 20 bricks before your hands resembled ground beef and your back locked up like a frozen computer. The workday ran from sunrise to sunset because Babylonians hadn't discovered the revolutionary concept of work-life balance. They also hadn't invented overtime pay, workers' compensation, or the basic idea that maybe employees shouldn't die from their jobs. Your productivity would be measured in bricks per day, and falling short meant meeting with management in ways that make your worst performance review look like a spa day. The heat would be like working inside an oven that someone forgot to turn off, except the oven is the size of a city and you can't leave. Temperatures regularly hit 110 degrees Fahrenheit, which is hot enough to fry eggs on sidewalks if Babylon had sidewalks instead of just more opportunities to step in human waste. You'd be sweating more than a politician during a corruption investigation, except your sweat would evaporate instantly, leaving you dehydrated faster than your motivation during Monday morning staff meetings. Your modern back, adapted to ergonomic office chairs and proper lumbar support, would be screaming louder than dial-up internet by the end of the first hour. The constant bending, lifting and carrying would cause injuries that never heal properly because ancient physical therapy consisted of walk it off and maybe try praying harder. Ancient Babylon was basically a theme park for every disease known to humanity, except instead of fun rides, you got cholera, dysentery and parasites that would make you nostalgic for the stomach flu. The city's population density combined with sanitation systems that would horrify modern health inspectors created perfect conditions for biological nightmares that would overwhelm your immune system faster than celebrity scandals overwhelm Twitter. The water supply came directly from the Euphrates River, which doubled as the city's sewer system, like a multitasking app that's terrible at both functions. Upstream communities dumped their waste into the same water downstream cities used for drinking, cooking and bathing, creating a continuous cycle of contamination that would make modern water treatment engineers weep and consider career changes. Waterborne diseases were so common that beer was often safer to drink than water, which sounds fun until you realise the beer was made from grain contaminated with ergot fungus that causes hallucinations, gangrene and death. It's like choosing between regular food poisoning and food poisoning with bonus psychological effects and potential limb loss. Food preservation was impossible without refrigeration, so meat spoiled faster than produce in college dorm rooms, becoming breeding grounds for bacteria that would make you yearn for simple food poisoning. Vegetables were grown using human waste as fertilizer, spreading intestinal parasites through the food supply like malware through an unprotected network. Even wealthy people struggled with nutrition and food safety issues that would be easily preventable today with basic knowledge and proper storage. The poor survived on diets so inadequate that most people suffered from multiple vitamin deficiencies, chronic malnutrition, and stunted growth that affected both physical and mental development, like running software on hardware that can barely handle basic functions. Your modern immune system, pampered by vaccines, antibiotics, and generally clean living conditions, would encounter diseases it had never seen before, and react about as well as a Windows 95 computer trying to run modern video games. Within days you'd be collecting illnesses like Pokemon cards, except instead of being fun, they'd be slowly killing you in creative and unpleasant ways. The air quality would trigger immediate respiratory problems for anyone with modern lungs accustomed to relatively clean air. Babylon burned wood, charcoal, and dried animal dung for fuel, creating constant smoke that would make Los Angeles smog look refreshing. Add metalworking, pottery kilns, and other industrial pollution, and you'd be breathing an atmosphere that would make wearing masks seem like a luxury spa treatment. The psychological reality of living under absolute tyranny would be devastating for anyone raised with concepts of individual rights and personal autonomy. You could be conscripted for military service, forced into labour gangs, relocated to different cities, or executed based on royal whims that change more frequently than trending topics on social media. The casual violence that characterised daily life would be psychologically shattering for modern sensibilities. Public executions were regular entertainment events designed to terrorise the population into compliance, like reality TV shows, except everyone dies horribly, and attendance is mandatory. Seeing people burned alive, eaten by animals, or tortured to death would be routine occurrences you'd be expected to attend and applaud, like giving standing ovations at corporate presentations about layoffs. The religious system would create constant anxiety about offending gods, whose requirements were more complex and contradictory than terms of service agreements that no one actually reads. Failure to properly observe religious ceremonies could result in divine punishment, social ostracism, or criminal charges, making every day feel like walking through a minefield while blindfolded and juggling. You'd never be certain whether you were adequately fulfilling your spiritual obligations to dozens of gods who were more demanding than social media algorithms and significantly more likely to kill you for not engaging with their content. Each god had specific requirements that could conflict with others, creating impossible situations where satisfying one deity meant offending another, like trying to please every member of a dysfunctional family during holiday gatherings, except the consequences for failure involved being eaten by sacred animals. The complete absence of privacy would be mentally exhausting. Living in single-room dwellings with multiple family members and livestock meant no personal space, no quiet moments, and no ability to process trauma privately. Every emotional reaction would be visible to others who might report suspicious behaviour to authorities, creating a surveillance state that would make modern privacy concerns seem quaint. Sleep would be constantly interrupted by noise, overcrowding, parasites, and the anxiety of knowing each day could bring conscription, punishment, disease, or death. The chronic sleep deprivation would compound all other stresses like running multiple demanding applications on a computer that's already overheating and running out of memory. The taxation system would reduce you to poverty faster than medical bills in America. The king's ownership of everything wasn't theoretical. It was practical reality enforced by armed guards who made tax collectors look like friendly neighbourhood volunteers. Agricultural taxes started at 20 to 30%, but could jump to 50% without warning, like subscription services that suddenly double their rates, except you can't cancel, and non-payment results in slavery or death. Craft workers had to produce quotas for royal use before creating anything for personal profit, like being required to work unpaid overtime before earning your regular salary. Merchants paid tribute on all transactions plus fees for using roads, bridges, markets, and legal protections, creating a system where every economic activity was taxed like freemium games, where every action requires additional payments. Military service was mandatory and could last for years, meaning you could be drafted away from your family and work with no compensation beyond basic food and weapons. During your absence, your family would still be responsible for all taxes and obligations, often leading to economic ruin, like having your student loans continue accruing interest while you're in a coma. The currency system based on commodities fluctuated wildly based on harvests, wars, and royal policy changes that could be announced without warning, making financial planning about as reliable as weather forecasts. A bad harvest or military defeat could make your savings worthless overnight, like cryptocurrency crashes, except there's no possibility of recovery, and the consequences include starvation. Interest rates on loans were astronomical and compounded rapidly if payments were missed, creating debt traps that were nearly impossible to escape. Many people became permanent debt slaves, working without wages while their children inherited the same obligations, like student loans that get passed down through generations except with more actual slavery. If you were among conquered peoples, your situation would be hopeless due to systematic cultural destruction policies designed to erase your identity and remake you as a loyal Babylonian subject. Your name would be changed to reflect foreign religious beliefs, like being forced to update all your social media handles to honour your conqueror's gods. Your language would be forbidden in official settings, requiring you to learn Akkadian and Aramaic to communicate with authorities or conduct business, like mandatory software updates that delete your preferred language settings and force you to relearn everything in a foreign interface. Your religious practices would be banned and replaced with mandatory participation in Babylonian ceremonies that violated your fundamental beliefs, like being required to attend and enthusiastically participate in celebrations honouring people who destroyed your family. Dietary laws that defined your identity would be ignored, forcing you to choose between starvation and consuming foods you considered spiritually contaminating. Your cultural traditions, clothing, music and art would be suppressed in favour of Babylonian alternatives designed to remake you in the image of your conquerors. Your children would grow up as Babylonians with only fragments of your original culture preserved in secret family traditions that became increasingly diluted with each generation, like trying to preserve important data on devices that keep getting factory reset. The psychological impact of losing everything that defined your identity would be devastating beyond modern comprehension. You'd be surrounded by monuments built by people who destroyed your civilization, forced to contribute labour glorifying the king who enslaved you, required to worship gods who supposedly authorized your conquest, and the annihilation of everything you held sacred. You wouldn't last a day in Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon. You probably wouldn't survive your first mandatory corporate worship service, your first performance review conducted with wild animals, or your first day of hauling bricks while wondering if today's the day you'll be conscripted, renamed, or promoted to Human Torch for expressing insufficient workplace enthusiasm. Sweet dreams, and remember, even your most stressful Monday morning, your worst traffic jam, your most demanding deadline, or your biggest personal disappointment remains infinitely better than the best day in ancient Babylon, where the employee handbook was carved in stone, the HR department was a fiery furnace, and the company picnic involved mandatory worship of golden statues or immediate termination of your life, not just your employment. Hey guys, tonight we're climbing up to the fortress of Masada, a desert plateau where Jewish rebels made their final stand against the Roman Empire. We're talking about 967 people trapped on a mountaintop, watching 8,000 Roman soldiers build a massive siege ramp stone by stone, knowing that when it's finished they're all going to die horribly unless they choose to die on their own terms first. Picture yourself standing on a desert plateau 1,300 feet above the Dead Sea, and immediately you know this isn't going to end well. The fortress of Masada rises from the desert like nature's own skyscraper, except instead of elevators and air conditioning, you've got scorching heat and the growing certainty that you're trapped in humanity's most expensive death trap. The view would be breathtaking if you weren't too busy panicking about survival. The Dead Sea glimmers far below like a massive mirror, which sounds beautiful until you remember it's salt water that's 10 times saltier than the ocean, and completely useless for drinking. It's like having an infinity pool that's specifically designed to kill you if you try to use it. The air hits you like opening an oven door, dry, scorching, and carrying enough dust to make you feel like you're inhaling the Sahara one grain at a time. Your lips crack within hours, your throat feels like sandpaper, and every breath makes you more aware that water is the most precious substance on Earth, and you definitely don't have enough of it. Think of Masada as the world's most extreme Airbnb, spectacular views, historically significant location, and absolutely terrible amenities. The guest reviews would definitely mention the lack of running water, limited food options, and the fact that checkout time is determined by an army of very angry Romans who aren't interested in negotiating your extended stay. This fortress was originally built by Herod the Great around 30 BCE as his personal luxury doomsday bunker. We're talking about palaces with stunning frescoes, elaborate bathhouses, and defensive walls that would make medieval castle builders weep with envy. Herod basically built the ancient world's equivalent of a billionaire's apocalypse retreat, complete with enough supplies to outlast any siege and amenities that would keep him comfortable while his enemies died of boredom outside. But you're not here during Herod's luxury spa phase. You're here in 73 CE, 3 years after the Romans destroyed Jerusalem and burned the Second Temple, like cancelling a subscription service, except instead of losing access to premium content, you lost your entire civilization. The survivors who fled to Masada aren't tourists enjoying the facilities. They're desperate rebels led by Eleazar ben Yair, and they're about to face the full wrath of Rome's most efficient killing machine. The rebels weren't professional soldiers, they were regular people whose lives had been destroyed by war. Families with children, elderly grandparents, craftsmen and farmers who never expected to find themselves making final stands against the world's most powerful military. These were people who just wanted to live their lives in peace, like wanting to stream Netflix without buffering, except the Roman Empire was the ultimate internet service provider from hell. Now they're trapped on a mountaintop watching the desert below fill up with Roman camps laid out in perfect military precision. The Romans don't do anything halfway. Their siege preparations would make modern project managers weep with admiration. Each camp is positioned with mathematical precision, creating an inescapable net around the fortress like the world's deadliest Wi-Fi coverage. Your daily routine begins before dawn, not because you're an early riser, but because sleep is nearly impossible when you know an entire legion is working around the clock to end your existence. You'd wake up on stone floors that make hotel beds feel like cloud storage, your body aching and your mouth already desperately dry. Water rationing dominates every moment. Your daily allowance might be a single cup of warm, stale water that has to sustain you through another day of scorching heat and growing terror. You'd sip it like it's the last energy drink on Earth, knowing this tiny amount needs to keep you functional while the temperature tries to cook you alive. Modern people who complain about tap water taste would literally murder their neighbours for access to Masada's carefully hoarded supplies. Food would be even more depressing. Your daily ration consists of a handful of grain and maybe some dried dates if you're lucky, like a meal kit subscription service designed by your worst enemy. There's no DoorDash, no grocery store, no restaurant options, just whatever the rebels managed to stockpile before the Romans arrived, and it's becoming increasingly obvious it won't be enough. The psychological pressure would be unbearable for anyone with modern anxiety management techniques. You can see Roman camps spread across the desert below like a military city, complete with organised supply lines and systematic construction of siege equipment specifically designed to kill everyone you care about. It's like watching your worst enemies move into your neighbourhood and start building weapons in their backyard, except your neighbourhood is a mountaintop and there's no HOA to complain to. The thing that would absolutely destroy your mental health isn't just being trapped on a mountaintop with limited supplies, it's having to watch the Romans systematically solve the problem of how to kill you, with the methodical precision of engineers working on the world's most morbid infrastructure project. The Roman army that showed up wasn't some disorganised mob, it was the 10th Legion, professional military specialists with decades of experience destroying fortifications and crushing rebellions. These guys were basically the Navy SEALs of the ancient world, except instead of quick strikes, they specialised in the patient, methodical destruction of anything that dared oppose Roman authority. Looking down from Masada, You'd watch the Romans set up their siege camps with the efficiency of a tech company, rolling out global infrastructure. Each camp was laid out according to standard protocol, perfectly rectangular, with organised streets, designated supply areas, and administrative buildings. It's like watching someone set up a temporary city in the desert, except this city's sole purpose is planning your death with corporate-level efficiency. The Romans didn't just bring soldiers, they brought an entire support network that would make modern logistics companies jealous. Engineers, architects, construction specialists, supply managers, and administrative personnel who could organise complex projects under hostile conditions. They were essentially running Amazon Prime delivery services for death, and they had a 5-star customer satisfaction rating from previous genocides. The most psychologically devastating part would be watching them build the siege ramp, a massive earthwork highway designed to bring Roman siege engines up to fortress level. This wasn't a weekend project. It took months of continuous construction, giving you plenty of time to watch your death approaching one wheelbarrow of dirt at a time. Modern people get impatient waiting for software updates. Imagine watching thousands of workers building a structure specifically designed to kill you, knowing every day brings them closer to success. You'd wake up each morning, look down at the ramp, and see it had grown noticeably higher overnight. It's like watching the world's slowest and most terrifying progress bar, except instead of installing software, it's installing your doom. The Romans used Jewish prisoners as forced labour, adding psychological torture that would require new therapy techniques. You're watching members of your own community being worked to death, building the instrument of your destruction, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. It's like being forced to watch your co-workers build the machine that's going to fire you, except instead of unemployment, you're facing creative execution methods. The siege lasted several months, meaning you'd spend day after day watching the ramp grow higher while your supplies grew lower, and your mental state deteriorated faster than produce in a broken refrigerator. The Romans had patience and unlimited resources. You had desperation and rapidly diminishing everything else. Every morning brought the same routine. Wake to Roman construction crews starting work, ration your handful of grain and sip of water, check the siege ramp's progress, and try not to think about what happens when it reaches the walls. It's like being stuck in the world's most stressful Groundhog Day, except Bill Murray's character wasn't facing imminent crucifixion. The psychological pressure would build like notifications you can't turn off. You know the Romans are coming, you know approximately when, but the uncertainty would eat away at your sanity. Modern people struggle with anxiety about job interviews or medical results. Imagine that feeling lasting months, while watching professional killers perfect their murder techniques outside your window. Sleep would become impossible as construction noise continued throughout the night. The Romans worked in shifts, so you'd hear constant sounds of a massive military camp mixed with siege preparation. It's like trying to sleep next to a 24-hour construction site that's also hosting a death metal festival, specifically designed to keep you awake while you contemplate your mortality. Your dreams, when you managed any, would be filled with nightmares about Roman soldiers, siege engines, and the various creative execution methods awaiting anyone captured alive. The Romans had a well-deserved reputation for making examples of rebels, and their punishments were designed to be so horrible that other potential rebels would reconsider their life choices. The social dynamics inside the fortress would become increasingly strained as supplies dwindled and hope evaporated. People would argue about rationing, strategy, and whether negotiation might be possible. These conversations would make your worst family holiday arguments look like friendly disagreements about restaurant choices. The siege ramp was a genuine achievement that would impress modern construction workers if it wasn't specifically designed to facilitate mass murder. The structure was essentially a stone highway rising from desert floor to fortress walls, wide enough for siege engines and equipped with defensive works to protect attacking forces. Moving thousands of tons of material in desert conditions that would hospitalize modern workers within hours, the Romans used engineering expertise and forced labour to create their highway to your destruction. The attention to detail would be terrifying. They weren't just building access, they were creating a comprehensive system for efficiently destroying everyone you loved. Every day brought visible progress that you could measure and calculate. It's like watching the world's most competent and deadly contractors working on a project with unlimited budget and timeline, except their deadline is your death date. This psychological impact of seeing your doom approach with mathematical precision would destroy anyone's mental health faster than a smartphone addiction. Let's be honest about your survival chances in basic environmental conditions, completely ignoring the minor detail of being besieged by professional killers. The desert heat alone would destroy your air-conditioned existence within hours. Temperatures regularly exceed 110 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to cause serious illness in people accustomed to climate control and unlimited cold beverages. Your body, adapted to office temperatures and frequent bathroom breaks, would be completely unprepared for relentless solar radiation and air so dry it sucks moisture from your lungs with every breath. You'd be sweating more than a politician during a corruption investigation, except your sweat would evaporate instantly, leaving you dehydrated faster than your motivation during Monday morning meetings. Water scarcity would kill you before Roman siege engines. Your daily ration of warm, stale water would have to sustain you through 24 hours of desert conditions, while your body desperately tries to cool itself. Modern people who complain about tap water taste would commit war crimes for access to Masada's hoarded supplies. The physical demands would break your modern body like cheap furniture. Everything required manual labour: hauling water, preparing food over fires, maintaining walls, carrying supplies up stone staircases. Your hands, accustomed to keyboards and smartphone screens, would be destroyed within days by rough stone and wooden tools. Sleep would be nearly impossible on stone floors that make airport benches feel luxurious, while temperatures remained punishing even at night. Your digestive system, accustomed to processed foods, would be overwhelmed by coarse grain and dried dates, leading to malnutrition and vitamin deficiencies that would compromise your immune system faster than reading Twitter comments. The psychological challenges would destroy anyone with modern expectations about personal safety and conflict resolution. You deal with multiple trauma layers simultaneously: immediate death threat, helplessness watching doom being built, survivor guilt, and impossible decisions about protecting family from fates worse than death. The constant visibility of Roman preparations would create psychological torture with no modern equivalent. Thousands of people working specifically to kill you, with progress visible from your window. It's like having your worst enemies move next door and start building elaborate murder equipment in their backyard while live streaming the construction process. The sound would be constant reminder of approaching doom: hammering, shouting, stone scraping, work crews chanting, construction noise that never stops. Building your grave with professional efficiency, it's like living inside a construction site that's creating your tombstone, except the project is always on schedule, and over budget doesn't matter because Rome has unlimited funding for genocide. Social dynamics would become increasingly strained as resources dwindled. People would argue about everything while children asked questions no adult could answer honestly. Why can't we leave? When are the Romans going away? Are we going to die? Every parent's instinct to protect would conflict with growing certainty that protection was impossible. According to Josephus, defenders ultimately chose mass suicide over Roman capture. Whether historically accurate or dramatic embellishment, it illustrates impossible psychological pressure of people cornered by circumstances beyond control. Roman capture meant slavery, torture, and death in amphitheatres, where crowds would cheer while prisoners were torn apart by animals or forced to fight gladiators. Children would be sold into slavery, women faced sexual bondage, men would be tortured for information before being worked to death in mines and quarries. Parents would have to weigh whether killing their children might be preferable to allowing capture. Husbands and wives would discuss murder-suicide pacts as acts of love. These conversations would happen while watching Roman siege engines being assembled outside, with evidence that capture was inevitable and Romans were preparing overwhelming assault. Modern people struggle with career changes and relationship decisions. The psychological pressure of deciding how to die and whether to kill family members to save them from worse fates would destroy anyone's mental health permanently and immediately. Here's your profound reality check. Your worst day of modern anxiety would still be paradise compared to a single hour at Masada during those final siege weeks. When you complain about delayed flights, slow internet, or long grocery lines, remember Masada's defenders spent months watching Doom being built stone by stone. When frustrated about work deadlines or difficult bosses, appreciate that your professional challenges don't involve thousands of soldiers preparing to kill everyone you love. Your modern problems are solvable or manageable through various means. You can change jobs, move locations, seek therapy, appeal to authorities, or walk away from intolerable situations. Masada's defenders had none of these options. They watched inevitable destruction approach with mathematical precision, while rationing water in desert heat. Your anxiety about uncertain futures, while real, is based on possibilities rather than certainties. You worry about things that might happen. They watched unavoidable destruction approaching with engineering precision. Your stress involves consequences that are inconvenient rather than fatal. Their timing calculations involved life and death for entire families. You have luxury of believing most problems are temporary and solvable. Bad jobs can be left, difficult relationships ended, health problems often treated, financial difficulties usually overcome. You live with a reasonable expectation that tomorrow will probably be better than today, or at least different in potentially improving ways. Masada's defenders knew with absolute certainty their tomorrows would be worse than today's, until final tomorrow when everything would end in ways too horrible to contemplate clearly. They couldn't distract themselves with entertainment, comfort themselves with food, or escape through travel. They were trapped in nightmare that grew progressively worse until reaching devastating conclusion. When you feel trapped by circumstances, remember your cage has doors that can be opened with effort, time, and help. Their cage was a mountaintop surrounded by Rome's most professional killers, and the only doors led to demonstrably worse fates. Your biggest siege is waiting for deliveries, not watching an empire build ramps to destroy your life. Your worst neighbours are loud, not systematically constructing instruments of death while testing catapults. Your most stressful waiting periods involve medical results or job applications, not calculating when professional killers will finish preparations and come to end your existence. You wouldn't last a day at Masada, not from lack of courage, but because your systems evolved to handle solvable problems rather than situations that can only be endured until their inevitable, horrible conclusions. But you don't have to last a day there, because you live where such situations are historical rather than personal realities. Sweet dreams, and remember, your worst siege is waiting for technical support, not watching an empire systematically prepare your destruction. Sleep peacefully, knowing your enemies are limited to causing inconvenience rather than building massive earthworks designed to facilitate your death. Rest comfortable knowing tomorrow will almost certainly be better than today. Security and hope that Masada's defenders couldn't access during those final terrible months. Picture walking through gates into a world where your morning commute involves navigating the most complex bureaucracy ever created. Your dress code is enforced by officials who've memorized a 1,000-page manual, and your workplace spans 180 acres of the most beautiful architecture on Earth, which you're barely allowed to look at directly. We're stepping into the Forbidden City during the early Ming Dynasty, around 1420, when Emperor Yongle had just finished building what might be humanity's most ambitious attempt at creating perfect order on Earth. The morning sun hits golden roof tiles stretching to the horizon, and you immediately grasp that you've entered something unprecedented, a city-sized machine for creating what the Chinese called Tianxia, all under heaven, their vision of perfect cosmic harmony made manifest in wood, stone, and human behaviour. Walking through these courtyards, you'd see the results of the most ambitious urban planning project in history. Every measurement follows numerological principles, Every building placement reflects feng shui theory. Every pathway serves both practical logistics and cosmic symbolism. It's breathtaking, and it works. This complex successfully housed, fed and coordinated tens of thousands of people using organisational principles that European societies wouldn't develop for centuries. But here's where it gets challenging for your modern mind. This wasn't built for efficiency or convenience. It was designed to embody the belief that human society should mirror celestial perfection, with the Emperor as the earthly pivot point maintaining universal balance. Every person, every action, every daily routine was meant to contribute to this cosmic harmony. As a servant, let's say you're assigned to courtyard maintenance. You'd wake before dawn in shared quarters that weren't cramped punishment cells, but carefully planned community housing. The Chinese had developed sophisticated theories about group living that balanced individual needs with collective harmony. Your roommates wouldn't be randomly assigned. They'd be chosen to create social dynamics that reduce conflict and encourage mutual support. Your morning routine would begin with what seems like obsessive grooming, but was actually applied social psychology. The Chinese understood that visual harmony reduces social friction in large groups. Your appearance wasn't vanity. It was communication technology, instantly telling everyone you encountered your role, status, and current assignment without need for lengthy introductions or explanations. The complexity would be staggering. You'd need to learn traffic patterns that weren't arbitrary restrictions, but sophisticated crowd management systems. Thousands of people move through these spaces daily. Officials, servants, craftsmen, guards, visitors, all following protocols that prevented chaos while maintaining the ritual significance of imperial space. It worked. But learning it would be like mastering the rules of an incredibly complex board game where mistakes had real consequences. Your specific duties might involve sweeping courtyards with stones that cost more than houses, but you'd also be participating in what was essentially the world's most elaborate performance art piece, a daily recreation of cosmic order involving thousands of participants, each playing their part in maintaining the illusion, or reality depending on your perspective, that the Emperor truly was the Son of Heaven. The scale would overwhelm you. We're talking about a complex with nearly 10,000 rooms, walls stretching for miles, and courtyards so vast they had their own weather patterns. But what would really challenge you is understanding that every detail, every decoration, every ceremony, every daily routine served the larger purpose of maintaining what the Chinese believed was the fundamental order that kept civilization from collapsing into chaos. The genius and the burden of this system was its integration. You couldn't just do your job and go home. Every action was simultaneously practical work and cosmic maintenance. Every interaction reinforced both social hierarchy and universal harmony. It was remarkably sophisticated and remarkably demanding. The clothing regulations that would make your head spin were actually one of history's most sophisticated non-verbal communication systems. In a world without name tags or org charts, your appearance instantly communicated your rank, department, current duties, and even your family background to everyone you encountered. It was social media made of silk, and it worked. Imperial yellow wasn't just the Emperor's favourite colour, it represented Earth in Chinese five-element theory and symbolised the cosmic centre. Only the Emperor could wear it because, in Chinese cosmology, only one person could occupy the universal pivot point. This wasn't arbitrary tyranny, it was applied philosophy about how cosmic order translates into social order. But here's where the brilliance came with brutal costs. Get the dress code wrong, wear the wrong shade of blue, put a dragon pattern where a phoenix should be, choose fabric that suggested higher rank than you possessed. And you weren't just breaking rules, you were disrupting cosmic harmony, threatening the universal order that kept society functioning. The penalties could be severe because, from their perspective, you were endangering everyone. The system created remarkable efficiency and a massive bureaucracy, but it also trapped people in rigid categories that were nearly impossible to escape. Your clothing didn't just describe your current role, it defined your identity, your possibilities, your entire social reality. The psychological pressure of having every thread scrutinized for cosmic correctness would be crushing. Imagine having a boss who genuinely believes he's the earthly representative of cosmic order, appointed by heaven to maintain universal harmony. This wasn't primitive superstition. The mandate of heaven was sophisticated political theory, holding that legitimate rulers must demonstrate moral virtue and effective governance. If they failed, heaven would withdraw support and justify rebellion. But day to day, this meant your performance was judged not just on task completion, but on how convincingly you demonstrated proper relationship with cosmic hierarchy. You needed to show appropriate reverence, maintain correct posture, speak with proper deference, and radiate genuine gratitude for the privilege of serving imperial needs. It was method acting as job requirement. The Chinese had developed what was probably the world's first merit-based civil service system, with rigorous examinations testing knowledge, moral reasoning, and practical judgment. Officials weren't chosen by birth or bribery, but by demonstrated competence. This was remarkably progressive for its time, and it created enormous pressure on everyone to constantly prove their worthiness. Your supervisor might be someone who'd spent decades studying classical texts, passing brutal examinations, and climbing a hierarchy where every promotion required demonstrating both technical skill and moral character. They weren't arbitrary tyrants. They were products of perhaps history's most demanding professional development system. But that also meant they expected everyone under them to meet similarly exacting standards. The constant observation that would feel oppressive to you was based on Chinese understanding that communities function best when behaviour is transparent and accountable. Privacy as individual right was less important than creating social environments where people could trust each other's actions and motivations. This had genuine benefits. Corruption was harder to hide, conflicts were addressed before they escalated, and people received support when they struggled. But it also meant that every personal choice became community business. Every private thought was potentially subject to evaluation, and individuality could be seen as dangerous selfishness that threatened group harmony. Your colleagues weren't just co-workers. They were part of a surveillance network that helped maintain social order, but also reported suspicious behaviour, inappropriate attitudes, or insufficient enthusiasm for imperial authority. Making friends required navigating complex loyalties between personal affection and civic duty. Your day would start at 4 a.m. with bronze bells echoing across courtyards like the world's most ominous alarm system. There's no snooze button when cosmic harmony depends on perfect timing. Tardiness wasn't just unprofessional. It suggested you didn't consider imperial schedules sufficiently important to organise your sleep around serving divine convenience. The morning preparation would be exhausting. Achieving the required grooming standards, arranging clothing according to complex protocols, and mentally preparing for a day of constant performance would take hours. You'd need to be on from the moment you left your quarters until you returned, maintaining perfect posture, appropriate facial expressions, and ready responses to any encounter with higher-ranking officials. Your actual work, let's say sweeping courtyards, would be performed to standards that would make luxury hotel housekeeping look casual. Every stone had to be perfectly clean, every surface spotless, every tool properly positioned. But you'd also need to do this while following elaborate protocols about movement patterns, interaction with other workers, and responses to passing officials. Lunch wasn't a break. It was another ceremony. What you ate, where you sat, how you held your chopsticks, what topics you could discuss. Everything reinforced hierarchy and maintained social order. Complaining about food quality would suggest dangerous dissatisfaction with imperial generosity. The workday ended when imperial activities concluded, which could be early evening or well past midnight. There were no labour laws because serving divine authority was considered spiritual privilege rather than employment requiring fair treatment. Your time belonged to the Emperor as completely as your loyalty. Your housing within the Forbidden City complex would be aesthetically stunning. Perfect architecture showcasing imperial wealth and power. but you'd share cramped quarters with multiple other servants, sleeping on mats arranged with military precision, with about as much personal privacy as a public restroom. Personal belongings were limited to necessities that wouldn't suggest inappropriate luxury or security risks. Books might indicate dangerous literacy and unauthorized ideas. Personal decorations could suggest vanity or individual identity threatening collective harmony. Even letters from family were suspicious, implying divided loyalties between imperial service and personal relationships. Your social life would be entirely determined by workplace hierarchy. Making unauthorized friendships could be seen as creating networks that might threaten security. Romance required official approval and constant monitoring to ensure it didn't compromise imperial interests or create conflicting loyalties. Entertainment consisted of approved activities that reinforced imperial values. There's no personal downtime as we understand it. Rest was preparation for better service, not individual enjoyment. Your free time belonged to the emperor as completely as your working hours. The mental strain would be crushing. You'd need to maintain perfect performance in a system where minor mistakes could be interpreted as cosmic threats, where every interaction required complex calculations about hierarchy and protocol, and where your thoughts themselves were potentially treasonous if they didn't align with imperial wisdom. The constant vigilance would be exhausting, monitoring your posture, expressions, tone of voice, and responses while also performing your actual duties to perfectionist standards. It would be like having a job interview that lasted your entire life, where the consequences of failure included not just unemployment, but potentially death or punishment of your family. The isolation from familiar social patterns, casual communication, and individual choice would create psychological stress that your modern mind wasn't designed to handle. You'd exist in a world where spontaneity was dangerous, where genuine emotion could be seen as inappropriate, and where your authentic self had to remain permanently hidden. Despite its costs, this system created remarkable achievements. The Ming Dynasty lasted nearly 300 years, built some of history's most beautiful architecture, developed sophisticated arts and literature, and maintained relative peace and prosperity for hundreds of millions of people. The organizational principles that seem oppressive to us actually solved complex problems of large-scale human coordination. The emphasis on ritual and ceremony wasn't empty pageantry. Modern psychology shows that shared rituals create social cohesion, reduce conflict, and give people sense of meaning and belonging. The Chinese had discovered these principles centuries before psychology existed as science, and built them into systems that worked for their context and values. The hierarchical structure, while limiting individual freedom, created clear paths for advancement based on merit, provided social stability during turbulent periods, and ensured that important decisions were made by people with appropriate training and experience. It wasn't democratic, but it was often effective. But the system also created real suffering. Social mobility, while possible, was extremely limited. Individual expression was suppressed in ways that stifled creativity and innovation. The pressure for conformity punished people whose minds worked differently, or who had needs that didn't fit standard categories. The surveillance and control mechanisms, while maintaining order, also enabled corruption, abuse of power, and suppression of legitimate grievances. People who questioned unfair treatment or suggested improvements could be labelled as troublemakers threatening social harmony. The emphasis on hierarchy and deference, while creating stability, also perpetuated inequalities and made it difficult to address problems when those in power were incompetent or corrupt. The system's greatest strength, its emphasis on maintaining order, was also its greatest weakness when that order became unjust or outdated. Real people lived entire lives within these constraints. Some thrived, finding meaning in service, achieving respect through excellence, contributing to remarkable cultural achievements. Others suffered, trapped in roles that didn't suit them, punished for natural impulses, denied opportunities because of their birth or background. The servants who swept those courtyards were human beings with dreams, fears, relationships, and desires for something beyond perfect submission to imperial authority. The system's success in maintaining order came at the cost of suppressing much that makes life worth living for individuals. You wouldn't last a day in the Ming Dynasty Forbidden City, not because you lack strength or intelligence, but because you've been shaped by entirely different values about individual worth, personal freedom, and social organization. Your need for privacy, casual relationships, and individual choice would clash with their emphasis on hierarchy, ritual, and collective harmony. But here's the complex truth. This system created both remarkable achievements and genuine suffering, often simultaneously. It solved problems of large-scale social organization that we still struggle with today, while creating new problems that we've learned to avoid. It enabled incredible cultural flourishing while suppressing individual creativity and expression. Neither their approach nor ours is perfect. They created stability and beauty at the cost of freedom and individuality. We've created freedom and innovation at the cost of community and meaning. Both represent human attempts to solve the fundamental challenge of living well together, with different priorities and different trade-offs. When you wake up tomorrow in your private space, making individual choices about your day, your relationships, and your future, you can appreciate both the freedom you enjoy and the remarkable alternative represented by the Forbidden City. You can also recognize that both systems require wisdom, effort, and commitment from their participants, and both create benefits and costs for the people who live within them. The real lesson isn't cultural superiority, but cultural complexity. These were our fellow humans, creating sophisticated solutions to timeless problems. Their solutions were different from ours, with different strengths and different failures, but equally human and equally worthy of understanding. Sweet dreams in your wonderfully imperfect, beautifully free, sometimes chaotic modern world, where you get to choose your own path through the eternal human challenge of living meaningfully with others.